I'm WG and welcome to 9's Complete Kit. We now have the full 9 kit on the table, including every single Epiphany, cards, partner effect, potential, and everything else you could wish for in one fell swoop. So let's once again start with our keyword lecture. So in the top left you can now see the unique resource that she has. It's kind of the shield icon and it refers to Honed Edge. Honed Edge is a buff that she can gain herself and it has two different versions, Honed Edge and Honed Edge Plus. Keen Eye notices at the moment there is no difference in description between Honed Edge and Honed Edge Plus, but you can assume that Honed Edge Plus is going to be around 25, maybe 30% instead of the 20%. It's probably a typo, should be fixed once the season launches tomorrow. But it's also a bit more of a niche case, that Honed Edge Plus. Then Ignition. Ignition is the concept of if this card is in your hand and you exhaust any card, you reduce the cost of this card by 1, allowing you to massively reduce the cost of a card and also use teammates' exhaust abilities, like for example a Luke providing bullets to do so. And then Incinerate is the idea that when an effect is activated, when the card itself is exhausted. So an exhaust card with the Incinerate effect, upon you playing it or exhausting with an outside effect, triggers the effect that is named after Incinerate. So now that we have the keywords out of the way, let's have a look at 9. So we're going to be starting off in the top left and we have ourselves the basics. The basics are straightforward: 2 1-cost attacks and a 1-cost skill. What you do is you deal single target damage and a shield, but what's important is what's below this. You unlock this with the basic attack potential very early on, and it says that for the entirety of the turn, exhaust based attack cards deal 15% increased damage. Is it only her? Is it the entire team? It is at the most likely just her, but then again you realize why this is actually kind of overpowered. So up to a 30% exhaust based attack card boost. Then we have ourselves Hue. Hue is a unique card, meaning you can't copy it. It is Initiation, meaning it starts in your hand. It is Exhaust, meaning that if you use this it gets exhausted. And it's Ephemeral, meaning that it is going to disappear from your hand, exhausting itself automatically at the end of your turn. So it either exhausts itself guaranteed at the end of your turn if you're not using it, or it gets exhausted when you play it and it starts in your hand, and it has a cost of 3 at 420% defense based damage, and it creates 1 Hue level 1. We'll get to that in a second. Next up we have the Experience Strike, which deals damage and gives you a shield based on how much damage it deals, while then also further increasing the damage amount of exhaust cards by 20% for 1 turn. Keep in mind, Hue is exhaust, so is the buff from Slash, so there's a 30% multiplicative, there's a 20% multiplicative. Now going into Fatal Strike, we have 168% damage, and then you also increase the damage amount by 20% for each cost of the highest cost exhaust card in hand, and then exhaust that card. Hue itself is a 3 cost, meaning that if you have a Fatal Strike and Hue in hand, playing out the Fatal Strike exhausts the Hue card and boosts the damage of the Fatal Strike by 60%. Counterblade is your unique upgrade card, and it says when a shield is gained through an ability, you get a stack of Honed Edge, which is the 20% damage increase for exhaust based attack cards, meaning that if you gain 3 shields, you get 30% multiplier from Slash, 20% multiplier from Experience Strike, and up to 60% multiplier from Counterblade, bringing us to Fighting Spirit. Fighting Spirit allows you to activate the highest cost attack card of this unit in hand, and then also exhaust those cards as well, allowing you to once again use it on Hue to activate the card. After activation, that card then also gets exhausted. And here we have ourselves Reflection 0. 250% defense based damage AoE plus 50% damage amount for each point of the combined cost of the 2 highest cost cards. So if you have a Hue and let's say a Fatal Strike in hand, that is going to be together 4, and then you're going to add 4 times 50, so 200% on top, making it a 450% AoE damage. Now, I teased you a bit with it. What does Hue even do? Hue is a very, very unique existence, and that is, these are the Epiphanies, but first let's have a look at even what happens with normal Hue. So, if you use Hue in any way, shape or form, you exhaust it, you play it, whatever you do with the card, it triggers then the Incinerate effect. Remember, if a card gets exhausted, the Incinerate effect triggers. And what this does is creates Hue level 1. Hue level 1 is 84% higher, 504 versus 420. And then if you use this card again, you create Hue 2. Hue 2 is 600% versus 504. And then finally create Hue 3. That has 720% damage, and if you use this card up, then at the start of the next turn, you create a Hue in hand, which is this one, so you can do the whole cycle again. Right? That is how Hue works, and Hue has 5 different Epiphanies. You have Ironclad, Extreme, Flash, Massacre, and Ambush. And the crazy part is, every single one of those has a different, Hue sequence, you could even say. So let's start with Ironclad. Ironclad has higher base damage and gives you a shield, and then creates the Ironclad line. The Ironclad line, once again, also more damage than your base Hue, but every single one of these Hues as well has the 240% shield gain, meaning if you play the entire Ironclad line, you're going to get yourself a shield of 960%. And you can also notice that the Hue Ironclad, the final one, is a 2 cost versus a 3 cost. The next one is Hue Extreme. Hue Extreme takes a nerf to base damage in the base Hue Extreme version, but it makes up for the fact that it has 5 different levels. So it starts on Hue level 1, or it starts on Hue, making Hue level 1 at 432. Then Hue level 2 at 504, Hue level 3 at 660, Hue level 4 at 816, which is already higher than Hue level 3 normally at 720. You get 816, and now the most important one, Hue Extreme level 5. 1200% base damage. That means any multiplicative damage boost, this is true for all Hues, are applying to that base damage. If you boost, let's just go with the extremes, right? Because big number make brain go wow. If you boost Hue Extreme by 30%, if you boost Hue Extreme by 30%, that's a damage increase of 400%. And keep in mind, she does have the tools. She has the tools to get a 30% here. You can get another 20% here. You can get Honed Edge a 60%. These multipliers are getting out of hand. You're going to be able to see multiple multi-thousand Hue use cases every time you do a Hue rotation. And let me already put you on a little bit of an idea, and that is Owen. Owen has the ability to add an additional hit to the next attack card played. Picking up what I'm putting down? Yep, you can use that with a Hue Extreme level 5 to get a insane amount. And also, Orlea. Orlea is really good. Like, really good at providing percentage-based multiplicative damage increases. Every time you retain her slime, you get a multiplicative damage increase. And yeah, even a 10% bonus is 120% bonus or 6 morale stacks. So that is Hue Extreme. But there's more. Hue Massacre. So, Hue Massacre actually, deals, did we actually skip one? We do Flash, wait. Flash is after, I think. Ambush and Flash. Yeah, so we're gonna skip a bit to Massacre. It's just the order I have it here. So Massacre says you now deal AoE damage to all enemies, but the more enemies there are, the less the multiplier will be, meaning it will be still effective against single targets, because with a single target you won't decrease the damage amount, but against AoE targets, let's say there is 3 different targets, you're going to reduce it by 30%, which should be from the total, so you kind of know how like the iceberg reduction worked. So this is kind of keeping it a bit more in line, not making it too outrageous. But she has the AoE attack, and depending on how many targets you face, it gets reduced between 10 to probably 50%. But then still does a massive, like insane amount of AoE damage. So that is Massacre. And then we have ourselves Ambush. Ambush says that you now trigger the Hue cards on ally counterattack. So that means you're going to keep Hue Ambush in your deck, in your team, in your hand. You build up counter stacks, you end your turn, the enemy attacks you. Let's say then your Magna does one counterattack, Hue Ambush triggers. Enemy attacks you again or with the second hit, meaning another counterattack, boom, Hue Ambush level 1 that is now freshly created triggers. Next counterattack, Hue Ambush level 2 triggers. Next counterattack. So yeah, it's a way to play Ambush without paying any cost, just solely through your teammates or even her herself counterattacking. Where we then have the final one, or in this order, final one, and that is Hue Flash. Hue Flash makes use of the ignition mechanic we talked about, and it's that the difference here is you can make this incredibly cheap. Every time you exhaust a card, this Hue goes down in cost, then you can play it, create a new Hue, reduce that one in cost, play it, create the new Hue, reduce that one in cost, and the like. So you have a counter trigger, you have a AoE version, you have a exhaust cost reduction version, you have a single target massacre version, and you have a shield gen version. One of the, if not the most versatile card in the entire game. It's going to be, yeah, quite the feast. Then now we have the usual Epiphanies, the standard ones, without creating 100 million cards. So the first one is a simple upgrade to base damage and also increasing the multiplier to 30%. Keep in mind, she has insane multipliers, meaning this one is even more impactful. This is, for example, for the Extreme Massacre, 120% added damage. So this card is already on my watch list in terms of favorites. The next one here has the same tags, but if a card was exhausted this turn, increase damage amount of this card by 30% for one turn until used. The question is, how high does this stack, right? The important part here is you can see by 30%. So if without any outside buffs, you're adding 70% damage, because that's 30% of 250, 70% damage to this card every time a card is exhausted. And if you can stack this infinitely, you can also turn this into an absolute menace of a hitter, but you are losing out on the exhaust-based damage card bonus. The next one right here, straightforward, increases shield gain amount of skill cards by 30%, which should be probably as well team-wide, just making your entire team a lot more tanky. The next one here is plus 60% damage for each exhaust card in hand, meaning it hard caps at plus 540% or 9 exhaust cards in hand. And I think this one is definitely a bit more on the weaker side when it comes to Epiphanies. And then for the final one, we have for one turn when an exhaust card is activated, gain 1 counterattack. So she can now also become a counterattack unit herself to even trigger her own ambush counter stance. Huh? Now, Fated Strike is the one that's usually used to activate Hue. For the first one, we have to increase the damage amount by 30% for each cost of the highest cost card, meaning that it's going to be then a 90% increase to the 252 base, plus activating the Hue card. The next one is just more cost but a higher base multiplier, meaning a bigger impact of this multiplier right here. The middle one is quite interesting in that it's unique, right? You can't copy it. You reduce the cost of this card by exhausting a card with the ignition multiplier. It is retain, meaning it stays into your hand until you play it, and it allows you to instantly change a Hue to its final level. It's definitely a really good option if you want to like just sustain her, if you want to get access to the 1200% massacre bonus as soon as possible. And it's also a very AP friendly option, but keep in mind it does not activate a card anymore. Now this one is a text as long as the Bible, but what it says is You exhaust 2 random exhaust cards of other combatants in your hand, and for each card that is exhausted through this ability, you increase the damage amount of the next used attack card of 9 by 30%. So let's have a look at an example. You have 2 1-cost exhaust cards and they get exhausted by Fatal Strike. That then means, or it's unimportant what they cost, right? You exhaust 2 cards and for each a 30% bonus, meaning a 60% damage bonus to the next attack card used, which, for example, just for big number, big good, for the Massacre final version would add 720% damage. 720% damage? No, not quite. Oh yeah, 720% damage because it's 30% for each. So 720% damage on top of the 1200 already with a singular card. Then the final Fatal Strike has Retain and it increases the damage amount by 80% for each ally owning a counter attack. The question here for this card itself would be, is it if you have 2 allies that have a counter attack 160%, or is it per stack of counter attack of each ally? Because if that is, then you could run this in a triple team with 2 characters at 10 counter attack stacks and get 1600% multiplier, which is kind of insane-o. Alright, now we have ourselves the Counter Blade. Counter Blade is a unique upgrade card at 0 cost, and the first version says when a card is exhausted, you get a Honed Edge instead of when a shield is gained through an ability. The second one increases your shield gain by 15%, and when you gain a shield through an ability, 1 Honed Edge. The middle one is like the base version, but with initiation, meaning at your hand, in hand at the start of your first turn. This one here is where Honed Edge Plus comes in. As a reminder, Honed Edge is this up to 60% multiplicative damage bonus for her attack cards, where I would assume again Honed Edge Plus to be higher, at least by like 5%. And then yeah, when counter attack is gained, 1 Honed Edge Plus, and the only way for you to get it outside of gear would be with this Experience Strike, where for 1 turn when an exhaust card is activated, 1 counter attack. So that is then the Counter Blade giving you Honed Edge Plus. Probably Honed Edge Plus is gonna make it worth you bending your back to make it happen. And then here at the start of the turn, activate Hue in hand 1 times, which is pretty much a 3 AP start off to any of these Hue sequences right here. And in exchange though, you do lose out on the damage bonus, so it's a lot more AP friendly but kept in terms of damage, because keep in mind, Honed Edge only comes from this and this card is unique, so there's no way to have multiple of these. And then the final card, as a reminder again, activates 1 highest cost attack card of this unit in hand, and then also exhausts that card as well. That brings us to already the potential. So her potential in the very top right, which is what you should be chasing first, says that if 9's defense is greater than 300, which is very easy to reach, you get a 5% multiplicative increase to order attribute damage, or better said, a plus 5% additional increase, but order damage itself is a multiplier. Now that makes more sense. And then also for every 10 defense exceeding it, you get 2% more, up to 10%, meaning at 350 defense you max this out, which is very realistic and pretty simple to reach, so long as you make sure that your bottom right piece has defense substat, and that you also work on her being level 60 and potentially some of her potentials. So that is the unique potential. Now we have ourselves the dupes, the ego manifestation, starting with the E1. Targets may be selected for attack card with the Fighting Spirit card, pretty much allowing your Fighting Spirit to select the attack card that you want to exhaust, which it's okay, right? It's okay, you can now pick it, but you should also be able to make a scenario happen where this exhausts what you want it to exhaust. So the E1 is not really something you should absolutely be going for. You would only go for it if you want what comes after. So what does come after is right here, the E2. E2 says that at the start of the battle you create one exploit opening card. Exploit opening applies one vulnerable, one tenacity. Here is the card. It has exhaust 2, meaning you can play it a total of 3 times. It also has retrieve, meaning it will come back into your hand the first time you play it out. And it also has retain, meaning it will stay into your hand until you decide to play it. What is important to note here is that there is definitely, obviously, exhaust synergy in her deck. There is advantages to having exhaust cards, but before you start glazing this E2 and call it power creep, it's only at the start of the battle. Meaning that you get this card once, you can then use it 3 times in a fight, and that's it. The main way I would see myself use this is either the tenacity damage if I really need to break something, but more importantly the ability to apply vulnerable, which is a 50% multiplier to the final damage you deal, allowing you to keep this for these big mega hit moments to, yeah, skyrocket the hypothetical damage output. Following that, we have the E3, which is just an increase to the damage amount of the ult card. It really doesn't add anything special, so it's not that important. The E4 is when 9 cards are exhausted, you gain 1 improvisation, equal to the cost of that card. Meaning that if a card costs you 3, you get 3 improvisation. Improvisation increases the defense-based damage amount of 9 cards by plus 50% per stack, meaning that if you use up 1 stack of few, you get 150% damage to any of 9 cards additively. So it's, yeah, it is a number, it is a good ego manifestation, but by no means is it game breaking due to it being additive rather than multiplicative. So you're adding 150% on top of something like 720%, which isn't nearly as crazy. So there's the E4, which still definitely is a good ego manifestation, just nothing that is absolutely game breaking. And the E5 will add 6% to any multipliers in 9 cards, be it the basic cards, the common cards, or the unique cards. And something that has to be noted here though is this multiplier multiplies the base damage of a card. So if a card, for example, has 420%, you take 6% of that, which should be around 23%, and you add that on top. So it's now going to say 443% at base, meaning also any further multiplicative damage increases apply with that base damage in mind. Hasn't really been super relevant on any characters. It's still a rather minor increase, and I still don't think the E5 is anything, or M5 is anything you should really chase on a character, especially because it's big cash money. But it is definitely more effective on her than on any other combatant we've seen before. Now the E6 though. The E6 though says that when a hue card is activated, you also further inflict 15% of the damage dealt to the target as fixed damage, meaning that at the end of the day this is, so however much you boost a hue card, whatever number comes out at the end, and whatever you do through crit or the like, let's say you deal 20,000 damage with that hit, you're also then going to get the additional 3,000 damage on top, or 15% of the total value. So it's a final damage multiplier, if you will. Making it pretty darn strong, but 7 copies also pretty darn unrealistic. So that is her copies and that is her dupes. And let me already tell you something else we've learned from the live stream. It is confirmed that season 2 is not going to have a limited combatant. Once again, proving that seasonal is meant as seasonal, like Christmas, like spring break, summer break, like it's just more like seasons, seasonal events, instead of it being once per season. Partner. Althea is, I think, what we're meant to call her. I think she kinda has very much similarities to Rin. I can't unsee it, and I like her design quite a lot. Though I'm kind of wondering what kind of fluid she's like pumping out of her arm now that I see it. But what she does is at base version, right? So these show you the base version versus the max dupe version. At base, you get an 8% defense increase, and when a card of the assigned combatant is exhausted or activated, you increase defense-based damage amount of the next card used by 20%, meaning that if you play a Hue, the Hue level 1 becomes stronger, play Hue level 1, then the Hue level 2 becomes stronger, and the like. So it's pretty much just a 20% damage bonus, which isn't as relevant to any other characters, but pretty relevant to 9. And then here, when a 2 cost or higher card of the assigned combatant is exhausted, you also gain yourself a 100% fixed shield at 1 time per turn, making her overall kit pretty darn exciting. And herein comes the ego skill, if you require assistance. It deals 250% defense-based damage, and it applies 5 stacks of Caustic Remarks. Caustic Remarks is a new debuff, and what the debuff does is it increases the amount that the target takes, the damage amount, by 20%, and if you yourself at the time of attacking have a shield, this turns into a 30% multiplier. So we have ourselves a 8% defense increase, 20% multiplicative attack card increase, 100% fixed shield, and a ego skill that applies 5 instances of a 30% damage buff to the next 5 instances of damage taken. And that's it. That's everything you need to know about 9. That's everything we learned about 9. I hope you're excited about her as I am. And then just at the end of the day, let's talk a bit about something. There were a lot of people saying 9's lobby has been nerfed because she's not completely naked. Let me clear that up a bit. So, there will be the option to play the lobby intro animation, the lobby like play animation, you know how the character does something. There will be like a play button here, and if you play that, you get the full experience, her like lifting it up, it all jiggling around, yada yada, zooming in, etc. If not, this is what she mainly looks like on your screen. So you kind of have for both. You have the complete degenerates and you have something for the tame people. And if I see anybody saying lobby 9 nerfed, then you're playing the wrong game. Peace.